Hello everyone. Today I want to talk about something that sits at the intersection of genuine science and a genuinely misleading industry, and that a significant number of people who are actively trying to improve their gut health are currently falling into. Not the idea that probiotics are useless. They are not. The research on specific probiotic strains for specific conditions is real, growing, and in some cases compelling. What I want to talk about today is the gap between what the science actually shows and what the supplement industry has built around it. Because that gap is wide enough to explain why so many people take a probiotic every day, month after month, and still don't feel better. And in some cases, feel measurably worse. Let me start with the fundamental misunderstanding that drives the entire probiotic supplement market. The gut microbiome contains somewhere between 38 and 100 trillion microorganisms representing thousands of distinct species. The diversity, the ratio, the specific ecological relationships between those species, that is the whole thing. That is what gut health actually is at a microbial level. It is not the presence or absence of any single strain. It is the complexity of the entire ecosystem and the conditions that allow it to. Now here is where the trap deepens. In individuals with already compromised gut environments, high intestinal permeability, existing dysbiosis, a microbiome that has been disrupted by antibiotics, chronic stress, or dietary monotony, the introduction of large quantities of specific bacterial strains through supplementation can produce outcomes that range from unhelpful to actively problematic. The most documented example of this is the relationship between probiotic supplementation and small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, a condition in which bacterial populations that should be confined primarily to the large intestine migrate into and colonize the small intestine, where they generate fermentation activity that produces gas, bloating, distension, brain fog, and systemic inflammation. This does not mean that lactobacillus is harmful or that probiotics cause SIBO categorically. It means that introducing any bacterial population into a gut environment without understanding the current state of that environment is not a neutral act. The bacteria interact with what is already there. They occupy niches, they produce metabolites, and in a dysregulated gut environment, the outcome of that interaction cannot be assumed to be beneficial simply because the strains involved are broadly considered friendly. The third layer of the trap is one the industry almost never discusses: the survivability problem. For a probiotic to exert any meaningful effect, the bacteria it contains must survive the manufacturing process. The storage period, the gastric acid of the stomach, the bile salts of the small intestine, and arrive in the large intestine alive and in sufficient quantity to do something. This chain of requirements is substantially more demanding than most probiotic products acknowledge. According to research, a significant proportion of commercially available probiotic supplements contain fewer viable organisms at the point of consumption than their labels claim, due to manufacturing inconsistency, inadequate storage conditions, and the natural die-off that occurs between production and use. In one study, examining the viability of organisms in widely sold probiotic products, a meaningful proportion of products tested below their labeled CFU count, and some contained strains in quantities so low that the therapeutic threshold for any known effect could not plausibly be met. The fourth and perhaps most important layer of the trap is the opportunity cost. Every month someone spends taking a probiotic supplement and expecting it to resolve their gut symptoms is a month they are not doing the things that the research consistently shows actually shift gut microbiome composition at the ecosystem level, increasing whole plant food diversity, introducing genuinely fermented foods, kimchi, kefir, miso, natto, sauerkraut, whose live bacterial content is orders of magnitude higher than most supplements and whose companion compounds feed the existing ecosystem simultaneously, reducing the chronic stress load that is actively degrading the gut lining, improving sleep consistency to allow overnight gut repair, removing the dietary inputs that are suppressing beneficial bacterial populations regardless of what the probiotic introduces. According to research, dietary diversity interventions produce significantly greater and more durable shifts in gut microbiome composition than probiotic supplementation alone, and at a fraction of the cost. In one study, increasing plant food variety to 30 or more species per week produced microbiome changes that were measurably larger, more diverse, and more functionally significant than those produced by 4 weeks of multi-strain probiotic supplementation in a matched control group. The food was doing more than the supplement, not because the supplement was worthless, but because the ecosystem responds to what it is fed at scale, not to a narrow introduction of a handful of strains. So what should you actually do? If you are currently taking a probiotic and experiencing meaningful, consistent benefit, continue. The research does support specific strains for specific conditions, and individual responses vary considerably based on baseline microbiome composition. Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG for antibiotic-associated diarrhea, Bifidobacterium infantis for IBS, Saccharomyces boulardii for traveler's diarrhea. These are evidence-based applications with documented efficacy. Real gut health is built at the ecosystem level. It is built through the diversity and consistency of what you feed the trillions of organisms already living there. A probiotic supplement, at best, is a narrow intervention in a vast system. At worst, in the wrong gut environment, it is adding to the problem it was supposed to solve. I hope this gave you a more honest account of something you may have been relying on more than the evidence warrants. Drop a comment and tell me whether you have noticed any change, positive or negative, from probiotic use. I read everything. If this was useful, hit the like button and share it with someone who has been supplementing without results. And if you are new to Nutriflow, subscribe and hit the bell. This is exactly the kind of conversation we have here. See you in the next one.